All right, let's jump right in. We're about to break down what might be one of the most high-stakes prayers in the entire Bible. It comes from a moment of absolute crisis in the ancient world, but what's amazing is how it serves as a kind of playbook for crisis management that is shockingly relevant for us today.
I want you to just imagine this scene. You have a king, his entire nation is facing annihilation, and his first move is to walk into the temple. Not with an army, but with a single terrifying letter. And the thought in his head is basically, Lord, have you seen this? Have you read this? I mean, it's such a human, raw, and relatable way to start what becomes an absolutely extraordinary moment.
So, to really get why this prayer is so powerful, you have to feel the pressure cooker of the situation. This wasn't some casual, everyday request. This was a response to a literal life-or-death threat for an entire civilization.
First, there's this incredible but totally false moment of hope. The massive, terrifying Assyrian army that had surrounded Jerusalem has actually pulled back. You can just feel the city exhaling, this massive collective sigh of relief. Everyone thinks the nightmare is over. They think they're safe.
But that relief? It just shatters. Because then messengers show up, and they're carrying a letter from the Assyrian king, Sennacherib. And this letter is pure psychological warfare. It's mocking their God, it's mocking their faith, and it promises that the army isn't gone for good. Oh no, it's coming back to completely wipe them off the face of the earth. And just like that, the despair is back, and it's even worse than before.
So, what do, right? The most powerful army in the world is about to descend on you, and you're trapped. Well, King Hezekiah's first move is, let's just say it's completely unconventional.
He doesn't call in his generals. He doesn't start debating military strategy. There are no frantic calls to diplomats. He knows, on a purely military level, he is hopelessly outmatched. So, he just pivots away from the conventional playbook entirely.
And his strategy is just so simple and so powerful. First, he goes straight to the temple. Then, he takes the actual physical letter, the very source of all this fear and dread, and he literally spreads it out right there in the open. And finally, he just presents the whole problem, laid bare before the Lord. He's basically handing the whole crisis over.
Okay, now we have to actually look at the prayer itself, because this is not some desperate, rambling, oh please, please help us kind of plea. No way. It's a structured, careful, theological argument. And that's because Hezekiah knows exactly who he's talking to.
The way this prayer is built is just fascinating. Before Hezekiah asks for a single thing, he spends the first part of his prayer just defining the identity of the one he's praying to. Now, this isn't flattery. This is strategy.
And just look how precise he is. He starts with Yahweh, the God of Israel, the God who has a personal history, a personal stake in these people. Then, enthroned between the cherubim, he's invoking the Ark of the Covenant, reminding God of the promises he made. But it doesn't stop there. He says you're God over all kingdoms of the earth, not just some little local god like the ones Assyria worships. And what's the ultimate basis for that authority? Because you are the creator of heaven and earth. You're the one who made this whole show.
And that foundation leads him right into the central argument of the whole prayer. Hezekiah sets up this brilliant contrast that completely reframes the entire threat.
He uses this incredibly rare and potent phrase, the living God. You have to understand, this term only shows up a handful of times in the text, and it's always at a major, critical turning point. It's a power word, and he's using it to draw a very sharp line in the sand.
And here is the line he draws. He says to God, "Open your eyes, give ear," which sounds kind of strange, but he's making a brilliant point. See, the idols of the other nations, they have eyes carved into them, but they can't see a thing. They have carved ears, but they can't hear. You, the living God, you don't have those physical things, but you see and hear everything. One is the creator, the others are just created things.
So here's the logical knockout punch. Hezekiah basically says, look, I admit it, the Assyrians have conquered a ton of other nations. But their king, Sennacherib, is seriously confused. He thinks he's been defeating other gods. He hasn't. He's just been throwing not gods, little pieces of wood and stone, into a fire.
You know, the scholar John Oswalt tells this incredible story of walking down a street in India once and seeing a man on the sidewalk literally manufacturing gods out of wet plaster. He had them lined up in all the different stages of creation. And this quote just perfectly captures the absurdity Hezekiah is pointing out. How can you possibly worship something that you yourself have made?
So this entire argument, all this careful groundwork, it all builds to the final request of the prayer. And what he asks for is truly stunning.
I mean, really think about that for a second. Put yourself in his shoes. Everything is on the line. Your city, your family, your life. What would your main motivation be in that prayer? Survival? Justice? Vengeance?
We would totally expect him to say something like, "Lord, deliver us. We're your people. We've been faithful. We need you." You know, the "we deserve it" prayer. But he doesn't say that at all. His big request is this: deliver us so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone are God.
And this is the masterstroke. The ultimate goal here isn't his own survival. It isn't even just about saving his nation. It's about God's global reputation. He is effectively turning his impossible problem into God's perfect opportunity. He's saying, do a miracle here, not for our sake, but so the entire world will finally see who you really are.
And that really leaves us with a pretty challenging question, doesn't it? See, Hezekiah was pushed into a corner where only a divine act could possibly save him. But the source material points out that most of the time we're too careful, we're too smart, too good at planning to get into situations like that. So the question becomes, when are we willing to face circumstances that are so far beyond our control that we're forced to just see what happens when a higher power has a chance to act?